Yeah. Now, tell me about the three lightning streaks. This is a very good looking tie.
Yeah, it's 87 Armored Regiment is a new raising. Mark you, I originally belonged to 16 Light Cavalry. I showed you the tie.
Right.
And I did 16 years with them,
Mm.
including the 1965 war. But after the 1965 war, I was posted to a new tank raising called the 66 Armored Regiment.
Mm.
And I became the second in command, and a year and a half later, I took over as the commanding officer. Now, this regiment was involved in the 1971 war. But by the time the regiment went to war, I had been posted out to the Defense Services Staff College
Okay.
as an instructor. See?
Right.
So that was about 1969. The war was in 71. Now, much later in life, when I'd become a corps commander, this regiment, 87 Armored Regiment, requested me to be their colonel,
Mm.
the colonel of the regiment. That means a very senior officer who is the father and father figure to help the regiment in case it has any problem. I told them that, look, I don't want to be colonel of your regiment because I haven't served in your regiment.
Mm.
I've served in the 16th and I've served in the 66 Armored Regiment, and I'm already the colonel of 66.
Mm.
16 Cavalry could not make me their colonel because I had not commanded the unit. They had a rule that until you command the regiment, you cannot be the colonel of the regiment.
Mm.
So then these chaps invited me to visit them. When I was the corps commander, I was in Mathura and they were in Meerut.
Mm.
And I visited them and found them a very good lot of people. And the commander was a chap called Lieutenant Colonel Bhupinder Singh Thakur,
Okay.
who later retired as an army commander, but he's a very fine officer. And I put him through his paces. I said, all right, I'm to run an exercise. They were coming under my command as a corps commander. I was running a huge exercise for the armored division in the Jalan district of UP, where the Ganga and the Jamuna flowed, and we were going to put the whole armored division into an exercise. So this regiment came there, and I saw them in mock battle. After that, I said, you're a good lot of chaps, and I shall certainly be honored to be your colonel of the regiment. So I became colonel of the regiment. It's a very fine regiment. It's a new regiment, and these are all, people make out their own signs and things. Give it to the army. Lightning streaks, there are 3 tank squadrons,
Okay.
and they're supposed to be moving like lightning.
Mm.
They're trained to do that. In fact, for your information, for the last 3 or 4 years, this regiment has gone to Gaza, to Israel and the Gaza Strip, Palestine,
Yeah.
as the United Nations troops are there to try and keep peace in that very violent area.
Mm.
And they're very well received by everybody there. So the tanks in Ahmad Khas are already there. The only personnel go turn by turn, one squadron at a time.
Mm.
And I had told you earlier the great story of the Haifa attack in end of the World War I, where the Indian cavalry on horseback went and captured a huge mountain resort called Haifa against it. Then Ottoman Turks, machine guns and battleships in the sea firing guns, but the horses came through an area which those people didn't realize horses could come through. Mountainous jungle area. You know how that people believe you can't do certain things, but if you have a mind to do it, that's the best way of achieving surprise, and they conquered the whole place. Got to Victoria Cross also. So that area is now being looked after by one squadron of tanks from Indian Army, along with other troops. There's a whole brigade group there. So this regiment has done about 2-3 years there. Right. Now, last time, Nivedita, we were talking about my going to the 19th Division, and it's in Baramulla. I wanted to say a few words about Kashmir to give you an idea. What is this Jammu and Kashmir all about?
Yes.
Why is it so important to our country? I'll make a few quick statements just to get you in the mood to understand why it is important. Many civilians say, about Why are you there in Ladakh, where Nehru said not a blade of grass grows, and you're fighting with the Pakistanis, you're fighting with the Chinese and all that? Why don't you just forget it and come away?
Yeah, what is
And I
there
always
after
felt,
all? What is there? Is the people, is the
I know.
land? What is there? What is it that we are hankering for?
What is there in Tibet? Not a blade of grass grows. The Chinese army is there. They control all your rivers. They look down on you. They can come down at you from the great mountains anytime they please. And the Indus flows through here, through Ladakh. The Jhelum starts in Kashmir, the valley of Kashmir. These are really important rivers which go through our territory and go to Pakistan, right? So strategically, it's a very important place. We'll go into that later, but I'll tell you why it is important. Jammu and Kashmir has been throughout our history perhaps one of the most important states of India. In the ancient times, it was controlled by Hindus. Lalitaditya, I told you once earlier, who fought in the Mahabharata war. He had conquered half of North India in his time. And he joined the Kauravas and got a bit of a defeat, unfortunately, because he was against the Lord Krishna. Nonetheless, he was a great king and he had a great army, and they all emanated out from Jammu and Kashmir. Now, Jammu and Kashmir, geographically, the Jammu region is mostly in the plains, but there are some hills going up towards the mountains in the north, beyond which lies the Kashmir Valley. And on the western side, we have very important hilly plus terrain, which is on the western side, bordering where the line of control is with the Pakistanis. And that's very close to Islamabad, by the way. It's only about 150 miles from Pakistan, from Islamabad. It's the northern bit of Pakistan. Therefore, they feel very threatened of us being there, Punch being the main important. I told you how Ravin Garewal, my GOC, received 5 bullets in the Battle of Punch and got no award for it. And I told you how he passed away, the great man. So I'll tell you one more thing. You remember, in the days of the ancient Old Testament of the Bible, the Israelites, who were slaves of the pharaohs of Egypt, were saved and led away by Moses. Now, Moses is a prophet of Judaism, he's a prophet of Christianity, and he's a prophet of Islam. We call him Muhammad Musa. See, Moses, the great prophet. And he gave the word. He brought the 10 commandments and all that sort of thing to the Israelites. And when he led them away across the Sinai desert, he wanted to take them to the land flowing with milk and honey. It's written in the Bible, right? He came to the river Jordan, and all those Israelites were fed up because they've been walking for months across arid Sinai desert. When they reached a bit of water where the Jordan River flows, and yes, there was some greenery over there, and there was some water. So they said, this is it, and they halted and went no further. But was that the land flowing with milk and honey? So there is a couple of German, from the 1850 onwards, German explorers, 2 of them specifically have written books, to try and trace where would this land flowing with milk and honey be. And they decided that the land flowing with milk and honey is Kashmir, because that does flow with milk and honey. To describe Kashmir Valley to you, which is such a bone of contention between Pakistan and us, and for that matter between China and us, it's a beautiful valley, better than any Switzerland can produce. There's no valley in the world which can compare. It's about 60, 70 kilometers long and about 40, 50 kilometers wide. And the Jhelum River rises at about 10,000 feet in the high mountains at a place called Verinag. Now, Verinag is a beautiful spring. The water just bubbles out of the earth. When I visited there in the early 1950s, because I was posted there, it was just a lake sort of thing with water bubbling out of it. And then that is the river flows from there, starts, other tributaries join, of course, to the Jhelum. That's the source of the Jhelum. To the Hindus, it's a very holy place. To the Muslims, it's a very holy place. To the
Right.
Buddhists, it's a very holy, right? That's very now. Now, of course, they've built a beautiful surrounding of that lake. They've made beautiful structures for tourists to visit, etc., because, it's a place worth visiting for anyone. And you feel very spiritually happy if you go and visit there. It's at about 10,000 feet. You cross Banihal Pass, which is at about, the pass is actually about 13,000 feet, but then the number of tunnels have been built, and the latest tunnel is at about 9,000 feet. You cross into the Kashmir Valley, and west of that, in the higher mountains, is Verinag, where the Jhelum starts. Now, the Jhelum flows through the valley, and because the valley is flat, I mean, it starts from 10,000 feet where the river starts, and it comes down to about an average height of about 5,500 feet. It's a flat, absolutely flat, like the plains. So the valley, the river meanders like this. There are hundreds of lakes and waterworks, etc. No Venice can compare. Everybody has a boat, and everybody can go anybody he likes in a boat. You've got houseboats, you've got things like that. The huge lakes that it has created, Bandipora lakes, and the Dal Lake is a huge famous lake in Srinagar. And then there is the Nagin Lake. They're all connected by the water, but they're separate lakes. Tourism from all over the world comes here to swim, to fish. And you have the lotus flowers growing out of these lakes. The lotus is a very interesting flower. All our so-called lords, many of them stand on the lotus, like Saraswati, for instance. She's standing on a lotus. What is the beauty of the lotus? It comes from muck. If you see the ground, but it's full of mud and filth. And it stands up there, it's the most beautiful flower. And the petals are so beautiful, they're untouched with the dirt. Right. But the roots are in the muck, right? And what you can eat every bit of that flower. It gives you very good nourishment. Even the bottom part of the flower, if the flower is large one, if you take the flower off, it's called poldoda. It's a cup in which the seeds are of the flower, and it is very good for health. You can eat that also. It gives you food. That is very beautiful. That's why you find even the BJP has got the lotus flower, that you stand in the muck, but you're above it. Yes. Spiritual flower. These flowers are dotted all over the lakes of Kashmir, right? So the point is, because of this water and because of the fact that there's huge open fields, it's one of the largest productions of blue little flowers called that. If you put a little bit in your tea or something, it gives it color, and it costs a lot. A little thimble, that much will cost about $1,000. Saffron. Saffron.
Okay, sir.
In Urdu, Zafran. In Kashmir, it is a town called Zafran. Fields and fields of this blue flower. It's absolutely purple in view, as far as your eyes can see. And when you pluck the flower, it is only the three, they've got 3 or 4 tendrils in the center of the flower. And the top of these are harvested, and that is where the saffron comes from. There are only 2 places in the world which produces saffron. One is Kashmir, and there is some place near Turkey, right? It has certain weather conditions and all that. Yeah, as many flowers there is in Holland. I don't know if you've been to Holland and seen the flower show, so but Kashmir is no less, right? Hundreds of poppies, hundreds of whatever you like. What does that show? That the ground is very, very fertile. It's got water, it's got very fertile soil. You have beautiful trees, the best fruit and the best badam and the best, any type of fruit you mention comes from Kashmir, whether they're apples or citrus fruit or luscious peaches. I've been to houses where the peaches thrust themselves at you from an upper window, so big. You bite them and, the beautiful juices flow down your cheeks. Nowhere in the country will you find this. This is Kashmir Valley. So it is a land flowing with milk and honey. All right? When we discuss on religion and spiritualism, more about it. Now, when the raiders came in 1947, Pakistani raiders, they came to destroy. They raped all the beautiful women, whether they were Christians or Muslim or whoever they were. And they cut the trees and they cut the flowers, and the badam tree takes 15 years to grow. You cut them down. Why? Because they wanted to remove the economy of Kashmir and its fame as a tourist center and as a fruit center of the world, and a flower center of the world, and a saffron center of the world. They burnt all this. Destructive people. Okay. So many travelers from Germany, two travelers I mentioned earlier from the 1850s and 1840s and 1890s, they felt that eventually this was the land of milk and honey. In fact, some of them claim that even Jesus Christ came from there. Anyway, we won't discuss that. We discuss religions and spiritualism. I just wanted to tickle your sense of interest. I suppose you to Kashmir. Now, what is wrong with this valley? Despite it being paradise on earth, quote Jahangir. Now, the other way, in the old days, before the Banihal tunnel was made, what is the method of getting into Kashmir? What the Mughals used to do is, it came from Poonch, which is on the lower mountains, and you come up a very steep pass, and you come across the great mountains of Kashmir at a height of about 13,000 feet. There's a pass there called the Chinamar Gully. There's an old Mughal route there. Okay. And you cross from there and you descend into the valley. The moment you come to 13,500 feet pass and you step into a place which is known as Tosha Maidan, I'm more about it later. You look into the valley, it's the most beautiful sight on earth. If you recollect the famous saying by Jahangir, which is in Farsi, but I will give you the English translation. Should there be heaven on earth, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yes.
An emerald surrounded by pearls. This is it. This is it. This is it. This is Jahangir. What is the emerald? The emerald is the green of this valley, about 50, 70 miles long, well, about 100 kilometers that you said, and about 70, 80 kilometers wide. Absolutely green, surrounded by mountains, 13,000 feet, 14,000 feet, 15,000 feet, full of snow. So it's an emerald in the center, surrounded by pearls, which is the mountain peaks, right? And that those mountains surrounding Kashmir, you see, are all around. They're in a circle. So anyone who wants to enter Kashmir has to come through high passes, except for one spot. The Jhelum River goes to the western end of the valley and courses through very fast rapids at a place called held place called Uri, which is at the height of about 4,000 feet. It goes rushing down through a gap in the great mountains to Muzaffarabad, which is held by Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, right? And from Muzaffarabad, it turns southwards and joins the Indus. So it's a tributary. The Jhelum is a tributary of the Indus River. Indus, as you know, starts from, well, it's near Mansarovar in Tibet, and it flows through Ladakh, and it goes up to a point beyond Skardu. Pakistan held northern areas of Kashmir. It goes a little further, but before it comes to the Baltal area of northern Kashmir, it turns south and then rushes down through various gorges to the plains of Pakistan, that's the Indus River. And that, in fact, has got Afghanistan to the west of it, and Pakistan, Punjab to the east of it. That's the first river of Punjab. Punjab has 5 rivers. That's the the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj, right? The rivers of Punjab. That's why it's called Punjab. It's the land of 5 rivers. Okay. So Kashmir's importance is that it is tactically very well positioned because it has borders with China in the north, that is Xinjiang region of China. It has borders with Afghanistan, right? And borders with Central Asia. Plus, it is an area of high tourism and high economy. Right. So everybody in the world wants to get a piece of that cake. You know why everybody's after this question, why we insist on keeping it. Right. So it was ruled by Hindu Maharajas first. Then came the Buddhists, they ruled for many centuries. Then came the Islamic conquest of northern India, first by the slave emperors and then by the Mughals. And Jahangir is the man after Akbar the Great who really conquered Kashmir and made it Islamic, right? And after that, since that time, the majority population in the valley has been Muslim. Who are they? They are convertees from low caste Hindus.
Right.
90% of the population convertees from low caste Hindus. I might tell you about convertees because in the Hindu caste system, unfortunately, we are trying to change that. It takes time. People have treated the low caste very poorly. A truth, which is not a favor. Because in the old caste system, nobody said that you have to retain your caste for the rest of your life, depending on your dad and granddad was. But in the division of society, as laid down by Manu, there are four castes anywhere in the world. There are the teachers, the wise men, the professors who are like the Brahmins. They teach. They have the knowledge. They have studied. They are the Kshatriyas, the fighters, the people who work for the military, or the people who go to the law courts and become, exercise the judiciary or whatever it is. They do their work. Then they're the business community who make a lot of money. And it is the business community which makes the money which runs the economy of the state. So there would be the Vaishyas. And finally, the street cleaners, the scavengers, the people who clean the streets for you. They clean the drains, they clean everything, they're paid well for it. But they're not that highly educated that they reach high level. So in that system of division of society, it's divided in every society in the world. Everyone in the world is like that. The trouble with the Hindu system is that at a certain stage in our history, some person decided that once you're in that caste, you're stuck there forever. That's incorrect. If you were born to a scavenger, let us say, like Ambedkar, but you studied and you reached a teaching capability, then you are a Brahmin. You can't be a scavenger because that's what your quality is. A person like me is born as a Brahmin, but if I join the army and become a soldier who does his duty to the nation and is ready to kill the enemy, then I'm not really a Brahmin. I'm a Kshatriya, though my caste is Brahmin. So the trouble is that you can't stick the caste to somebody. It really has to be according to what work he's doing. So I would say Ambedkar, who was supposed to be of the lowest caste, is really of the top class. He's a Brahmin because he gave you the constitution and he helped in the legal niceties of how the constitution is to be written. He was the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, right? He's given us a very fine constitution. So we have to put him right up there. So there it is. Now Mahatma Gandhi tried to stop this and he told said the lower caste would be called Harijans or something. Now Harijan has become a dirty word. Whatever word you use to describe somebody becomes a dirty word in due course of time. So much for the little introduction to Kashmir. I told you about Rabin Garibal and how he died. He's the man with the 5 bullets in his head, in his body, the hero of the Punch battle. A very fine general I served under, and I learned a lot from him. He's a tall man, 6'2", but he was a very soft-hearted man. For instance, I, as a young major who had just done the staff college, I was very keen that the Indian Army should be of a very high standard. And I, unfortunately, was outspoken. I shouldn't have been. You needed a little tact in these matters. But if there was a senior officer who misbehaved or did not function according to my standards of character and conduct, I would openly say so. So I must have told you that that's written in my report also, that this officer is unlikely to go very far in life because he has no tact with his superior officers. And I was very happy to sign that report after seeing it by GS1 at that time in the division of a chap called Hardev Clare. I'm going to talk about it. He wrote this. He said, look, you and I are friends. Please read this sentence because unless you correct it, you're not going to go far in life. I said, but this is the very highest compliment I've received in my life. I am a man who doesn't show tact with superior officers whom I think are not fit to be superior officers. But I have a lot of tact and love for my subordinates. So I said, it's easy to be nasty to your subordinates and,
Right.
do kanchusi as it is called,
Yeah.
or suck up to your superior so you get a good report. I'm not interested. And Rabin Garewal told me, he says, Major, you are doing that because you come from a good family and you know that even if you're thrown out of the army, which you will be one of these days, you can always go to a family that looks after you. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not that type of man. I am not here to live on my parents, on my other relatives who are doing their work in life. I'm going to do my own work in life. And if you kick me out of the army, I'll do something else. That I'll have to earn my own way in this life. I'm not going to depend on anyone else. That was my way of looking at things. So anyway, now when I arrived here, the first GSO1, that means I am a grade 2 officer as a major, the assistant to the division headquarters in operational planning. Above me would be a lieutenant colonel doing the same job. And he is the right-hand man of the general officer commanding. There was no second in command those days. Nowadays in a division, we have a brigadier who's the second in command. In those days, there was no such. See? So you had a general and you had two lieutenant colonels under him. One was looking after the administration, that's the quartermaster side, and the supplies and logistics. We call them AQNG. The quartermaster general's branch, and the other was the GSO1, you see, who was in charge of operations, and also in charge of education, and also in charge of advice to the GOC, and he used to make the government, according to the general's wishes, make the operational plans of how to fight war and all that sort of thing. So the first GSO1 that I met was a chap called Ram Singh, Lieutenant Colonel Ram Singh. I mentioned his name earlier. He was a major. I studied him because he was such a granthi. I mean, he only spoke down from a high level of position and gave me no chance to voice my opinion about anything. He said, you've come from Staff College and you're an armored corps man from tanks. You'll die on these hills if you try and climb them. They're very steep. You can't do it. So sit in your office and write the standing orders for war. And I told him, I said, Colonel Ram Singh, I'm sorry. Nobody reads standing orders for war. The war has become much faster. It's not World War I. We've already gone past World War II, where the battle has become so fast. I quoted Field Marshal von Rundstedt of the Germans. I told you, who dashed through the whole of the defenses of northern France and Belgium and all that in World War II, and almost finished the English at Dunkirk, where they ran as fast as legs could carry them. And he had that sign, fist, no fingers, fist, punch. Okay. Yes. So I said, he's a tank man. That's how his brain functions. You're telling me to sit there and write standing orders? Oh, there's no time for standing orders. In fact, there's no time for standing orders of any sort. There's no time for giving long-winded orders. You have to do everything on the radio now. It's too fast. Battle changes too fast. But Ram Singh had been in recruitment for about 15 years of his life, and now they made him a lieutenant colonel. He had passed off college, so they thought he's a good chap. And he became the GSO1 of this frontline division facing Pakistan. I had a bad time with him for 2-3 weeks because I just couldn't get past him. Couldn't get out of my office. And since he's my immediate boss, I had to go with the general whenever he asked me. But then I'm not one who complains to general about, my problems with the GSO1. But my luck was in, luck is a great thing. I don't know if you have it. You're very lucky if you have luck. Why do you have luck is a question you should ask yourself. I'm a lucky man. Some people don't have the luck, others do. All right. He got posted out. Back to recruiting. So the new man who came in, a chap called Hardev Sinclair, he's Sardarji, he's from Signals Corps. And he's a very forward propulsion mind. In fact, one of the best officers I've seen in staff. He took over as the GSO1, and he was sitting in the GSO1's office, calling the staff members one by one while he's sitting with him, with Ram Singh, to be introduced to the general staff branch of the headquarters, a number of GSO2s, and there's some GSO3s, and whatever, captains and majors. He wanted to meet the JSOs also. He wanted to meet everyone. with whom he had to deal. So I was the first chap to be called in, and I was introduced. And he asked me, he said, Major Sharma, I was a major. Any problems? I said, there are a lot of problems. He said, what's your problem? I said, the GSO1 and sitting here who's leaving, he's my problem. So he started laughing. He said, why is he your problem? I said, he doesn't let me get out of the office. He says, right, standing orders of war, and I can tell you there's no need for any standing orders of war. I've got to go on the ground because I cannot understand the maps. Situation reports come from the frontline troops who had firing and all that with the enemy every now and then, and some ambushes and some, killing and re-killing or whatever. And I can't understand because a flat map is difficult to understand unless you actually walk on the ground with the very high peaks. Peaks are going from let us say Baramulla is at height about 4,800 feet. These peaks are going up to 8,000, 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and they're all huge hills with deep valleys. And to understand the terrain, you have to walk to these pickets and see what they look like and see what the men look like and whether they're doing their job or not. I said, I have to do that. He said, very good. He had been brigade major, as a major, of one of our forward brigades, which is in a place called Tangdhar. Now, let me describe the valley to you. The valleys, Kashmir Valley is surrounded by these high mountains. The Pir Panjal range, it's known as. The Pir Panjal Hills. These are snow-capped mountains all around the valley. You penetrate that in two places. That's where the river goes out towards Muzaffarabad. You go down, and that goes through a bowl and then on to Muzaffarabad. So you've gone through these mountains. So that is one of the advances we've made. We've gone to a place called Uri, which is about 50, 60 kilometers beyond Baramulla, where there was a brigade headquarters, where there was a brigade, and they were in a bowl, but they were holding all the heights around them, and that was where the ceasefire line was between us and Pakistan, a line of control as it became later. All right. The other place where we'd gone through is a place further north of this, which is called the Tangdhar Valley. Now here you cross a pass called the Nastachun Pass. This Nastachun Pass is at about 15,000 feet, completely packed with snow in the winter. Now, the best part to cross into this, cross the Nastachun Pass and go down to this place called Tangdhar Valley, or Titwal Valley. Titwal was right in front, next to the river, cheek by jowl with the Pakistani position. It's on the lower line. We held all the pike peaks on all sides. The best way to go was in the winter because the snows were there in the winter. And so there was no movement from the enemy side. And you had to leave your vehicles a little below the pass, then climb through the pass on foot. And from the brigade that was there, they would send up a vehicle for you on the other end. When you cross the pass, you get into that and go down to the headquarters. And why you did that? Because if there's any sound in the winter, an avalanche of snow comes out. The pass is like this, with snow hanging on top of the hills on both sides. If you shout, there's an avalanche. If you have a motor car engine running, it's an avalanche. So you have to walk across. So he told me, all right, it was March, I just joined. He says, we are still on snows. You can go across to the pass. And the person commanding that brigade was a very interesting personality. I'm going to describe him to you. His name was Onkar Singh Kalkat. He's Sardar. He was a brigadier. Let me tell you a little about this man. Onkar Singh Kalkat was a major in Peshawar when the partition took place in 1947. He is the brigade major of one of our infantry brigades, which had Muslim and the Hindu troops. So when the Markata started, and all the Peshawar and all those places the Hindus were being killed, he stayed at his post to find out what the new government of Pakistan was up to. So he sent a signal, that's a coded message by radio, to Army Headquarters Intelligence to say Pakistan is making plans to attack Kashmir. Now, this was in about late August, early September of 1947. As you know, as I told you the story earlier, government of India did not come to know till October that raiders were going into Pakistan. And they sacked the army chief at that time, a chap called Rob Lockhart. I've told you earlier.
Yes.
Now, just look at the situation. Here is a major who sent that signal to Army Headquarters Intelligence in late August, 2 months before the government eventually came to know that there's garbadi going on here. I can see planning going on. They're getting people together, tribal lashkars, led by Pakistani officers and Pakistani NCOs in civil dress. And they're making plans to enter en masse into Kashmir, armed fully with artillery and mortars. You see? He sent this message. This arrived at military intelligence headquarters, which is just churning. The British had left and a lot of Indians were taking over. There's a lot of movement and, not very experienced officers were sitting there. But it was received by a major in our military intelligence at Army headquarters in Delhi. He straight away took this to the army chief. Right. The army chief that was the British officer. Again, called Rob Lockhart, right? Who was sacked later. So this said, no, I don't think there's anything much in this. It's a very interesting question. He told the intelligence people, there's nothing much to get. But the Indian officer major in the intelligence branch sent it to the IB, the intelligence bureau, from intelligence to intelligence, to say, please place this before the Prime Minister. So this message was poo-pooed by the IB, can't be possible. But nonetheless, they mentioned it as a Prime Minister, is a bakwas, nakalta. Nobody gave thought to what a major has said. See? It also shows that the British officers, senior officers like Rob Lockhart, the first commander-in-chief of the Indian Army after partition, were in cahoots with the chiefs of staff of Britain, who were planning that Kashmir must not go to India. Why? Because such an important strategic place. It has borders with Xinjiang and with Central Asia and also with Afghanistan and with Pakistan. And therefore, it should remain with Muslim Pakistan who obey orders and who will listen to what the British authority tells them. Because Pakistan was considered as people, yes, we'll give you money. We ask you to jump, you jump. And we did that. But they said the Hindu has a devious mind. The devious Hindu mind, according to British, is that the chap is thinking for himself. He's not going to do what he wants. He says, yes, I'm going to think about this, but he never thinks and he never comes back. So, Garland used to say, oh, there's a parliament here, I have to get it through the parliament. I've got a cabinet, I have to ask them. That's why the Western authorities like America and Britain preferred in these ex-colonial or colonial countries to have a dictator there who obeys their orders and gets it done. But if you have a